Sometimes you just need to take the slips out and bowl defensively. And you also need to be careful with your computer's defense as well. If you need a VPN, go Nord. NordVPN.com/Kimber to get a 2-year contract with a discount, plus 4 extra months and gifts in some markets. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the show notes. So put in some dot balls and turn them into maidens via NordVPN.com/Kimber. Everyone, and welcome to the Scoreboard. I'm Jared Kimber, and we're going to go through the games. The big heavyweights, the big dudes, the big dogs, all played in the last 24 hours. So let us go through India and Australia. We went through the England-West Indies game already, but let's go through the other ones just to have a look at how things are going so far. So let's start with the scoreboard. Remember, you can send super chats in if you know you're feeling the urge to, the need to. And we'll try and get to those at the end. True batting values for this World Cup, minimum 75 runs. Richie Barrington. Marcus Stoinis still up at the front. He didn't play again. Gabbar's tried to go absolutely nuts against India and then forgot that you don't attack Jasprit Bumrah's worst ball. You don't attack any of his balls, as we just made a video on the main channel about. So go over there and find that one. I think it's called The Threat of Jasprit Bumrah. It's quite fun. Rishabh Pant still quite high up on this list, and Andreas Hus also doing quite well. A couple of times now he's got himself started. And then on the bowlers, Fizz is still 4 runs and over better than anyone else when it comes to this. And even Australia, I wouldn't say that they defended him, but they were, what's the best way of putting it? They scored quite comfortably off him, but I felt like they weren't reckless the way that they maybe went after some of the other bowlers at times, because but it also still helped his figures because he didn't have to bowl as much in that game. Tavreez Shamsi has won a game for South Africa and still finds himself over here, which I do find very, very funny. Anyway, let's get into gap. Let's get into the gap. India's runs per over. In the game here, there's a lot of people who are very worried about their intent because they didn't score on the first 2 overs. I think I've probably talked about that a little bit over on the Cricket 8 podcast. So if you want to subscribe to Cricket 8, it's up on their YouTube page. Me and Mega talking about this yesterday. I think that actually shown pretty good intent through the New York game so far. They came here and they played a little bit differently, started slowly. I think they realized this was a bit of a difficult wicket and that they probably only needed, I don't know why this keeps dancing. They probably only needed so many runs to get to themselves. So I think they thought 155 to 160 is a good total. Let's get ourselves in. Weirdly enough, when they do start to score here, they lost a wicket almost straight away. But you can see it's pretty healthy, consistent scoring rate all the way through, even when they lost a couple of wickets. So I don't think there's anything to worry about there from this. I thought it was about 165, 167 par. They ended up at 180, knowing that they had Jasprit Bumrah, so any par is probably worth slightly more when he's involved anyway. With that, what is going on? That's not loving us today, is it? All right, here we go. So we saw Rishabh Pant going very, very fast again. Hardik Pandya getting some balls in the middle, very important. And both of these guys, neither of them played brilliant innings, but one getting 24 balls and the other one both of them getting 24 balls, I thought was a really, really important thing. It's always good when we get to see Arshdeep bat, so we should do that more often. Even Shivam Dubé getting, a couple of balls in the middle, hitting a 6, feeling a little bit more confident. But obviously Sky making his 53 off 28. Because he made this innings now, this is where becoming an Indian player is actually the worst thing that can happen to you from a reputation standpoint, because you're only allowed to make runs when it matters. And if you make runs when it doesn't matter, you've actually, not only have you, those runs do not count, they actually count actively against you. This whole idea that he's only good against weaker sides, like, what are we talking about here? That the innings he played against South Africa in the last World Cup on a difficult wicket when no one else could do it. Can we just please move on from this nonsense? Also, this is a world-class bowling attack, right? put India in a really good position. He's the reason that they scored, extra runs, and that the game was never in any doubt at all. We could see here. Well, I always thought he was going to struggle with Noor Ahmed. Didn't actually have to face him all that much, so that worked quite well. And we could see here against the two seamers, he did very well, and then played the leg spin. Excellent, I thought. This is his true values by phase in T20I, so he's a plus in all three, as you can see. When he's going in the power play, he's probably a little bit more hesitant. His true strike rate is only plus 10. But obviously in the middle, his true strike rate jumps up to 44. And if he does stick around to the death, it's actually quite hard to stop him just hitting the ball. There aren't many options of where you can bowl to him at that point. And these are his true values by bowling type. I don't know how much of this is just Noor Ahmed, by the way, but I'm pretty sure I looked this up and he had a weak record against Noor Ahmed coming in. So it might be that. Doesn't particularly like off spin, which I find a very, very interesting thing. So it's something about the ball spinning back into him. We can group those in. I think this is why matchups are really interesting, because everyone thinks you just spin the ball away from batters. Well, here you've got a batter who prefers the ball to be spinning away from him than into him. You can see that with the two bowlers here, and loves left arm pace. And we can see the last few years in T20 internationals. I don't take as much stock of T20 internationals just because the sample sizes can be a little bit random and everything else. But he certainly had a big couple of years in T20 internationals when needed. With the bowling, Mohammad Nabi did very, very well with his opening overs, kept the pressure on, put it in the right area, and helped them have a decent enough start. Fazal Haq Farooqi got his wickets again. He's going to be quite hard to beat for most wickets in the tournament. He's just been absolutely ridiculous at how often he has taken wickets here. I thought he bowled some really good deliveries early on. Naveen Al-Haq got a little bit of tap, and as we said before, Noor Ahmed went for some runs, but Rashid Khan was fantastic. We've seen him struggle sometimes against the bigger sides, and we've done a pretty deep analysis on that, I think, during the last World Cup, in the ODI World Cup. It doesn't really stack up, but at World Cups, at times, he's had some bad games against good opponents. This was not that, was it? This was fantastic. I love the way he went about it. Gave Afghanistan their best chance of winning the game, really. And we could see here a wicket in each of his first overs. And this one, I think, was it the last ball was a little bit poor, but he had one run off the first 5 balls of this over. And Hardik Pandya was trying to defend him and still couldn't hit him. Just beautiful bowling there. So India, a little bit over par, and Garbaz comes out and goes absolutely ballistic. Just a mistake from him to not be in a situation where he's trying to get off strike. But and I talked about this, as I said on that Cricket 8 podcast. It's a bit of a weird one, because does he make a mistake, or was that part of the plan to bowl that ball? Because Jasprit Bumrah doesn't bowl many wide half volleys, and that's what it was. His eyes lit up and he tried to hit it, and unfortunately he's got an edge behind. It's hard to say it was a terrible, terrible shot, but it's the one that lost them the game, right? And when you are facing Bumrah and you've got runs off that first over, it would have been in a better situation to knock that around. They actually stayed, in and around the game after losing those 3 early wickets. This good partnership in the middle. But without the 2 top order players, it was pretty much over at that point. And India probably didn't quite put their foot on their necks the way they could have. We got Omarzai top scoring here, but realistically, that was the problem. We've been saying from the start that if Ibrahim and Garbaz don't make runs, they really struggle. And unfortunately, it's another game where we've seen that. So the Bangladesh game and then the Australian games are still chances for them. They play Australia in a really good matchup. They're a similar kind of side to Bangladesh, so that could be an interesting game going ahead. But the bowlers, Rashid and Fazal Haq, completely stood up. They now need someone other than the top 2 batters to step up. All the top 2 batters to make all their runs, I suppose, is the other way of looking at it. Indian bowlers, Bumrah was pretty handy there. Fantastic effort from him. 3 for 7. as I said, I actually think even when you're chasing 180 in that situation, if you have Gabaz and Ibrahim, it is worth them blocking that first over out. But it's hard. You get a wide half volley, and as a batter, you just think you should be hitting it, but he's just not the same as everyone else, right? Interesting. We saw him bowl 2 overs in the power play, so looks like that might be some. Well, there's 2 options. I suppose they did that because they wanted to put pressure on Afghanistan so the game was over, or they did that because they had 1 fewer specialist seamers in the side. The other specialist seamer did take 3 wickets, but did get tonked around a little bit. Be very, very interesting to see where that goes. Someone told me that Arshdeep was playing ahead of Siraj because of right-handers compared to left-handers, because Afghanistan have a lot of right-handers. I mean, most left-arm bowlers are pretty good against left-handers anyway, and Siraj is pretty good against both, I would have thought. So I'm not sure if that quite stands up. I just think Arshdeep's just a little bit looser than Siraj, and Siraj can probably win you more games, but neither of them are in great form. They're a little bit shaky at the moment, but 3 wickets at least for Arshdeep. Kuldeep comes in for his first game. He's gone for more runs here, but has picked up a couple of overs. For him, it's just good match practice, right? The game was kind of over by the time he came on. 2 finger spinners being fairly economical, and they'll be happy to get more overs out of Hardik. Low pressure overs. And then we've got Jasprit Bumrah's figures. And so you can see here, this is at the 9 runs and over mark. Just how few times he goes at more than 9 runs and over, which for a death bowler is absolutely ridiculous. Really his ability to keep economy and doing everything else is just absolutely wonderful. And I almost think in T20 internationals, he's better at taking wickets than he is sometimes in the IPL. Yesterday's a good example of, I don't think teams in international cricket are quite willing to block you out. Whereas you look at, we've seen this in the IPL quite a bit, and not just IPL, other franchise leagues, I've noticed this as well. Sometimes teams are just willing to, if a player is playing that good, almost just go, well, we're just going to not be involved with them. We've seen it with Narayan, we've seen it with Rashid, we've seen it with Bumrah. We've seen it with a few other bowlers at times when they've been in really good form. Bhuvi was a good example, taking wickets early on. I wonder if teams might need to think about that. I mean, yesterday he took wickets and didn't go for runs. So we're not really talking about yesterday's one. And again, a bit like Rashid, just fantastic. And then he comes, it doesn't need the 4th over. But it was just 3 overs he bowled it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Let's get on to the other game, Bangladesh. I thought this was a fairly decent start. Got themselves in a good position here. The issue was, of course, that almost all the runs were coming from one end, right? So they lost that early wicket. Lytton Das got completely stuck, and Shanto started to make some runs all the way through. So this is Lytton Das going out, and that's the other interesting thing here, is that they managed after those 3 really bad overs to build themselves into a good position. They actually lost the guy who made, I have to look this up because it's a ridiculous number, isn't it? He made 16 off 25, and they actually slowed down. And they slowed down for a couple of reasons. One is they sent in Rishad Hassan as a pinch hitter, which is fascinating. And he made 2 off 4. So not a complete failure as a pinch hitter innings, but also, not exactly what you're looking for. And then Ridoy came in and started to pick it back up, but not long after Ridoy goes out, Shanto goes out. And they just got a little bit stuck towards the end of that innings. This is great, but if you start with this, it's hard to overcome it. And then they did get stuck in that middle period, right? We'll talk about the Australian bowlers in a moment, but there's no doubt here that this was not particularly. They struggle to put pressure on the better teams when they're batting. So Lytton Das down here, it's actually. They've got a couple of players. I know these guys didn't face as many balls, but they've got a couple of players here who just really struggled to put any pressure back on the Australians. Shanto, 41 off 36. It's okay, but he built that off a lot of dot balls early on and never really got ahead of the rate. And as I said, didn't push on. Ridoy, again, we have seen so many times with him, his ability to show intent and to move the game on a lot better than we think it is going to go is absolutely fantastic. But 40 off 28 is it needs to be backed up by a couple of other people, that kind of an innings, to have a real impact. And then that got some slogging at the death. This is opening partnerships in this World Cup. So we can see Australia is at over 10 runs and over. This is not true numbers, by the way. So this is just raw numbers. So some of this will be put down by the pitches that you're on. So you can see that. I was going to show India. No, I can't see India on this list, wherever they are. Where is India? Are they just in here? So India in here is a perfect example. You got South Africa in here as well, somewhere in all this messy bit down here. So what I'm trying to say is that the pitches play, a big role in that, right? However, Bangladesh is here. They are averaging 2.6 runs for their opening partnership. They faced 27 balls as an opening partnership, and then this is about as bad as you get. If you have a team which part of your identity is getting par scores, I don't think you can give up a wicket at the start of every single game the way that they have been. So that is very, very ordinary. Also, if you're betting on this World Cup, maybe betting on unders for Bangladesh's opening partnership at the moment. Certainly very different than Australia and Afghanistan, who we've talked about before. Their two openers being in massive form. So let's get the Australian bowlers. Obviously, Pat Cummins got one of those hat tricks that people don't really notice all that much. Stoinis finally got hit, but still got them a wicket. But what needs to happen is just one of these two guys needs to bowl well. That's the gamble that they play, and one of them did, and they both got wickets. So that is a big bonus. This is probably what they'll be most excited about. Obviously, a lot of this was just from that early start, but that's what they want from Mitchell Starc. Again, Adam Zampa was fantastic, and Josh Hazlewood didn't go for any runs. Then Australia went out to bat, and again, we saw that good opening partnership. They got a lot of runs. With a little bit of rain, they pushed themselves into a position where they made sure that the game was kind of completely locked off. Warner and Head both with, 140, 150 strike rates. Mitch Marsh failed, but they were well ahead all the way through, and they never really had any issues chasing that down. So you can see the good strike rates in here, and Glenn Maxwell came out at the end for, 14 off 6 balls to finish it all off. And Australia's opening partnership this World Cup, so outside of Scotland, they've made runs at the start every single time. And this one was kind of more moderate one compared to how they've gone in some of the other games, but that power at the top, and Warner looks in pretty good form himself. Mitch Marsh by bowling, okay, I'll get this out in a minute. Mitch Marsh true values by bowling type. So he is a right arm pace monster. That makes sense if you're from Perth, right? Like that's kind of what they feed you over there, the big bison, just getting fed right arm pace and probably a little bit of left arm pace as well. Interestingly enough, and I've seen this before, he's not too bad against left arm finger spin. But this is quite interesting because this goes completely against what we were saying for Sky earlier. He doesn't like right arm wrist spin, and he's not liking right arm finger spin. Quite random because they're spinning it in two different ways. One's a wrist spinner and one's a finger spinner. The pattern doesn't make sense here. It's not like Sky that has a perfect pattern. Anyway, he went out LBW to Rishi. I want to say Rishi. He should be a Rishi. Rishad Hussain, who we will see in a moment here. Mahdi Hassan bowled quite well. Tanzim didn't get the wickets and only bowled the one over there. Mustafizur got hit a little bit and they went after Taskin. But Rishad Hassan, his true economy is plus in this tournament so far, but his ability to get wickets is also, I should say his true economy is negative at the moment. I think he's about 1.5 runs worse than what you want him to be or something around that. But his wickets is ridiculous. He's just taking wickets absolutely all the time. So he's been fantastic at taking wickets, and well done to him. Now that he's a pinch hitter as well. England versus South Africa. I'm going to do this because I like the way that they look. Okay, some interesting patterns in this from what we could see here. So let's start with England. So the batting power play, not quite at the Australian or Afghanistan kinds of levels, but absolutely fantastic. They got a good partnership again the other day, and all the way through they're batting sensationally. Their bowling power play has not been good. they've tried spinners at times. Their seamers haven't really been great at the top. They've obviously gone back to Reece Topley, probably in part because this hasn't worked. But they're also not bowling brilliantly in the middle or at the death. So they're almost, at the moment, completely a batting side. For them to win the tournament, they're going to have to step this up. And this is always the most important part for me. Now we get to South Africa. So they've been batting terribly in the power play, really pulling it back in the middle and batting fine at the death. A team with their fast bowling on the pitches they've played with to be negative in the bowling power play, it's almost impossible. Weirdly enough, this is probably dominated by Anrit Nortje this bit in the middle, especially when he was at New York. But they've been much better in the middle overs, and their death's been okay. So what are the things that here are the most interesting? I suppose it's, if England and South Africa go up against each other when England are bowling, you'd have to say that's weakness plays weakness at the moment. And then the opposite of that, of course, is that the bowling in the middle overs compared to the bowling in the middle overs there. This is a concern for South Africa if their top or if their openers continue to struggle, because I think it's a lot harder for them to pull it back against a side like England with slightly longer batting lineup and the power that they have. All right, and that's us for the scoreboard part of the show. We'll take a quick break and we'll come to some questions if there's any super chats or anything else. I am Jared Kimber. This is the Scoreboard. I have a book out with Abhishek Mukherjee, and it is called Overthrowing Cricket's Empire. And it's about the stories of how each team beat England for the first time. We go all the way back to the demon Fred Spofforth getting annoyed at W.G. Grace for acting a little bit like Alex Carey. And then we come all the way to present times with Rashid Khan's England's redemption. We cover every single team to beat England in a major international, but we also talk about the incredible stories like the barefoot basher from Fiji that almost played for New Zealand. In fact, this book is full of tales like that, like how Pakistan lost a top batter after he was on the run from an angry husband of a movie star he was having an affair with, and also how one future captain of his nation realised he might have to go out and bat at Lords and that he didn't own his own pads. Cricket was used as a tool by the Empire, but what happens when those nations grow up and get good at it? Find Overthrowing Cricket's Empire on Amazon today. All right. Not many questions in here, actually. Jessica says, love a Shane. So that catch was incredible. We've seen two brilliant outfield catches in the Blast. So not in the World Cup, but in the Blast. Sikandar Raza's catch was absolutely fantastic. What was that, about a week ago, I suppose now? And then Labuschane's was even more amazing. Although they were both brilliant in different ways. Because obviously Sikandar Raza not hitting the boundary. So I'm sure it's on Twitter. Find it. Vedang said, did you rename this channel? Yeah, we've renamed all the channels. So, we are now part, my business is now the Good Areas brand. And so, it's not just me, of course, we have other shows, and eventually, especially on this channel, we'll probably have more and more shows from other people coming in as well. It's as much as anything, I don't really like having my name out there. Like I don't need it to be the Jared King. That's not I actually grew up with a Jared King, weirdly enough. I don't actually need it to be the Jared Kimber Network. I don't necessarily want my name in it or anything like that. So we're just moving on as a brand, and bringing in other things, and hopefully we will continue to grow and everything else from that perspective. It's also much better with sponsors and things like that. So there's a few different parts of that that work quite well. Vignesh says, are Australia going to struggle against Afghanistan due to their spinners, or is it just going to be an easy win for Australia? It's at St Vincent. So I think, is it St Vincent? Anyway, it's at a wicket that's going to help Afghanistan. So no one can actually answer that for you, Vignesh, but it feels like that's a huge advantage for Afghanistan in that game. I think we've got, we've got a good idea of what Afghanistan can do in that game. Also depends on the pressure and, what situation they're in and everything else at that point. Both teams. Muthu says, considering Afghanistan bottle chases more often, how crucial is it going to be the toss, and your thoughts on Australia would try and tackle spin? I think Warner is going to be the key. Do Afghanistan bottle chases more? Afghanistan are just not very good at batting. I'm not sure I think of them as bottling chasers. I just, I don't think they have a lot of batting talent, from that point of view. So yeah, I would have to have I would have to have a look at that. But I just don't think they're good at batting. I don't think it's a chases thing with them. How crucial is the toss going to be? It's a low-scoring ground. I mean, if they bat first, I think they would probably prefer to bat first because that allows them to come home with their bowling strength. But if they bowl really well early on as well, they're going to put themselves in a good position of doing that as well. Yeah, Warner playing spin is always going to be a decent part of it. I don't think I think Travis Head can also make it a mockery of that as well, and they've got Mitchell Marsh who can come in and whack it around. Although, as we just saw, maybe not as good a matchup for Afghanistan as is for some teams. Varun says, "What's up with Australia playing 4 games in 3 days?" Yeah, there's some scheduling. I've done a video over on the major channel. I've just that's what winning World Cups is. I don't know why it's kind of all been jammed together the way that it has been here, but that's the situation that we're in. And India have a game on Saturday and a game on Monday. Generally, that's kind of what we would refer to as a back-to-back in franchise cricket, and you assume that your team's going to lose the second one of those games. They don't always, but certainly happens more often. So yeah, it's not ideal, but that's how these things go. What else have we got here? Jugol says, "Do you think Sky can be bogged down with slower bounces like what happened in the ODI World Cup final?" I mean, no. I mean, any batter can be slowed down with slower bounces on a wicket that assists slower bounces, right? So if you're talking about one game, like if you were to say to me, "I've seen this 15 or 20 times," I could have a look at that for you, and it's quite possibly true. But if you're talking about one game, like that can be pitch conditions. That can happen to anyone on any particular ground at any time, right? Like that's just how cricket works. That's how these things go. Aniket says, "What do you think India's chances of winning this World Cup are?" What are they? Probably they should be about 4 or 5 to 1. I think they're shorter than that. So what would that be? So I'm just trying to work it out. 4 to 1. I should know that off the top of my head, shouldn't I? Is that 40%? 40%, sorry. Is that 20% or 25%? It's somewhere around there. I think that seems about fair, doesn't it? Australia maybe, 25 to 30%? And then, lay your odds for the rest of the teams from there, depending on how you like them. It's maybe the best way to do it. Varun says, and Varun helps put these videos together, he says that Gobaz and Zadran are significantly worse chasers than setters. But that's a good thing to know. I don't think they can keep going with only 2 batters, so I'm not they're not going to win anyway if that's what they do, right? That's not particularly the best way of doing things. Dhruv says, "If you're an Indian selector, would Virat, Rohit and Jadeja make the squad at 11? Abhishek with his off-spin and attacking batting." I mean, if I was a selector, every team would be massively different. There isn't a single side that wouldn't be different. Jadeja, yeah, I mean, you're going to the Caribbean on wickets are going to help someone like Jadeja, so he probably is someone. I probably wouldn't have, if you're talking about batting alone, I probably wouldn't have Virat and Rohit, but that's just because they don't suit the sort of cricket that I would want to play in that kind of situation. Michelle says, "Scheduling doesn't matter in this tournament when Test cricket exists." Look, scheduling is not a strength of cricket. When you look at international schedules and how we do things, it's, not having proper seasons, not, following, different countries having completely conflicting seasons, all these different things, it's always a bit weird from that point of view. Just want to see if there's anything else. Cyber Junkie says, "From adapting to different conditions perspective, how would you rank India, Australia, England, and South Africa?" Well, so as a team, you probably would prefer to be. India has the best flexibility, and probably India has the best flexibility in terms of bowling attacks because they have multiple first choice spinners needed, if needed, and they have, a bowling or a batting all-rounder who can bowl seam. So the flexibility there is probably a lot stronger. Australia has 2 all-round or 3 all-rounders in their 11, that can bowl seam or spin, and they can always bring in Cameron Green as well. Like, they probably won't, but it gives them even more flexibility from that point of view. England probably don't quite have that great flexibility of before, but because of Jacks, Moeen Ali, Sam Curran, Livingston, they have a different kind of flexibility. And South Africa have the least amount of flexibility because they have 6 batters. They have Marco Jansen at number 7, and basically none of that can change. Like, a player might lose form and they might replace them with someone else, but that's essentially, they have to go in with that lineup. And then they can pick one extra seamer or one extra spinner, but they don't have the kind of all-round flexibility that the other 3 teams have. So everyone has flexibility in a different way. Like, Australia would love to have Shamsi as their backup spinner, right? Or Maharaj instead of Ashton Agar as their backup spinner. England would probably prefer to have Shamsi or Maharaj rather than than their secondary spin options as well. India would probably like to, I don't know if they need him, but Nathan Ellis is like a stronger bowler at the moment than some of the Indian other, the seamers that they don't seem 100% sure on. So there's, every team has a slightly different way of going about those sorts of things. Moonlight says, asked you some months ago why Australia is still persisting with Stoinis regarding to his apparent low contribution with bat and ball. So far this World Cup, he's proven me wrong. Fair game. Well done for you for owning up to it, because I would never remember that. I don't remember that question. Look, he plays an important role for Australian cricket. I think in the Delhi side, is Delhi plays for it? Yeah, Delhi side. He doesn't quite play that role, and I actually think his best option really is still him as an opening batter, but he's a versatile player. He can bat 1 to 7, right? That gives you incredible versatility. It's good fielder, and he has a particular skill set with bowling that can sometimes be very handy, right? I think the players who are not dead set specialist stars quite often get seen as crap. And it's like, well, yeah, but you have to weigh up all this. And it's the bits and pieces side of it. But if you are selecting a side, you do need to worry about fielding. You do need to, if you're selecting a squad for a World Cup, having a player who can probably pinch hit as an opener, not that Australia specifically need that, but pinch hit as a number 3 if Mitchell Marsh got injured, or bat at 6 or 7 is really, really handy. And having someone who is a part-timer, but he's a part-timer who can bowl bounces, again, is a really, really important skill set to have. He's not a fantastic, he's not like a star, but as a role player, that's brilliant. Oh, I've read that one. And Abdullah says predictions. As I've said before, I'm not really a predictions person. I haven't really looked ahead to that game all that much. I would assume, based on what I've seen of recent times, I think England is playing slightly better cricket. But if all the South African bowlers find form on one day, I think that's a very good chance. It's a fantastic, we haven't had many games in this tournament where there isn't like a clear favourite. Like, I know England will start marginal favourites, which is fine. But, so you look at this tournament, what have you got? The next 4 games, just looking at the Betfair markets. USA is 8 against West Indies, so that's heavy favourite. India is obviously heavy favourite against Bangladesh, where Bangladesh are 8 as well. And Afghanistan versus Australia, Afghanistan is 5s in that game, right? So England being 177 and South Africa being 228 shows you that there isn't as much in it. So I don't think there's a clear favourite in that. I think there's a few different things if you go back to the team maps thing we talked about before, there are some times where I think the game will favour England, and I think there are some times when the game will favour South Africa. They may end up, it will either the weaknesses or the strengths. So, in any one game, you can overcome your form, and England could take a bunch of early wickets, for instance. But that's a weakness versus a weakness at the top. You would expect South Africa's openers to overcome England's bowlers in that period, even if they're both weak periods. But you've got a couple of times where you got weakness versus weakness, and a couple of times where you got strength versus strength. One of 2 of those break in the favour of one team, and it's going to be very one-sided. But if they doesn't, it could be quite a gritty and grimy game. So fascinating to see how it goes. Dipanshu, with the last question of the day, says, do you think... Oh, Doesn't help if I take his question off. Do you think we're going to see more bowlers with Bumrah-like action? I mean, I would assume so. In the same way we've seen more bowlers with Malinga's action, in the same way we even saw more bowlers with Murali's action. We certainly saw a lot of bowlers with Warne's action. Doesn't necessarily mean everyone can nail it. So there are, you know, I've always said that cricket's a very interesting game in that the fastest bowler compared to his peers of anyone ever was Jeff Thompson. No one has ever bowled like that consistently at the top level ever since. And the best batter compared to his peers ever, obviously, is Don Bradman. No one really has Don Bradman's technique either. So just being able to copy someone else's technique does not mean that you're going to be successful. Please see all the batters who tried to copy Steve Smith after Steve Smith came through. It hasn't been very pretty. Will we see more people trying to do what Jasprit Bumrah does? Yes. To be Jasprit Bumrah, though, it's more than just the action, right? You know, Tushara and Patharana both have a similar action, but there's a definite difference in the level of their bowling between the two of them. So having the action is the first advantage. It's what you make of that action afterwards, which is the most important one. Anyway, this is the last scoreboard for the last couple of days. So we'll be back with the scoreboard on Monday. And so we'll have plenty of stuff to talk about then. But I'm off for a couple of days because just every now and again, I actually have to not work. But I am Jared Kimber. This is a Scoreboard. If it's your first time here, you have to fight. No, that's a different movie, isn't it? You have to like and subscribe and do all those things. But thank you to everyone who was in the comments today and all the other days. Plenty of content. We've got a new video, as I said, up on the main site. If you're a Shahid Afridi fan, next week, we'll have a really cool video of him on the main channel as well. And we'll also be doing more reaction videos to the Super 8s. As they get more interesting, they haven't quite hit peak interest at the moment. But as the games get more interesting and we get towards the finals, we will have plenty when it comes to that. But I will see you again after the weekend. If you need your pitch changed, well, NordVPN can doctor any surface to a new location so that your IP address is set for you to win. Want to watch a game on a free stream in another hemisphere? Give NordVPN the ball. Or if you just want to watch a clip on social media that a cricket board won't allow, promote NordVPN to pinch hit. So if you need a VPN, go Nord. Use nordvpn.com/Kimber to get a 2-year contract with a discount, plus 4 extra months and gifts in some markets. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the show notes. Protect your computer like a bowler protects the boundaries in the death overs with nordvpn.com/Kimber today.